Record to the cloud. So it's just Jordan and me today. Today is June 25th, and this is the SIG Arch Code Organization call. So it's a short agenda. Let me share my screen and we can get started. So the first one is a new PR from Jan, I think. Jan Chalupa. Sorry. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Let me just get it right. Chalauka, I think. Okay. So what he's proposing here is having a staged repository, but then the twist here also is SIG scheduler shows up in the path. And I'm like hesitant to go down the route for this pattern. Jordan, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure I would put SIGs in package names in general. The
Conway's law, right?
What?
Conway's law or something like that. You know, the product that we ship reflects the organization that we have.
Yeah. I would probably, so I'm trying to remember where this was. So where did we talk about this? It was in the SIG auth call.
Was it? Okay.
There's a set of code that is higher level than API types and client libraries. So it doesn't really belong in API or client Go. But it is used by things like kube control and the API server, or the scheduler and the controller manager, or the scheduler and the API server. And because it uses API types or it uses client methods, it can't be a completely externalized repo.
Because it depends on K8s.io Kubernetes.
No, it depends on K8s.io API or K8s.io client Go.
Okay.
And so anything that depends on staging repos can't be an external repo that we then just vendor back in and share. So we had a need for moving the RBAC role reconciliation stuff out of K8s.io Kubernetes so that kube control can complete its move out of tree. Scheduling had a similar need for a place where the scheduler and the controller manager and the API server could share these helper methods that build on top of external API types. And so the question was, like, how finely do we slice components? Like, do you have a scheduling library component? Do you have an authentication library component? Do you have just things that build helpers on top of API types library? I don't have super strong feelings about how finely we slice it. I know the more we have, the harder it is to manage. Though I don't think we want like one for every package. Like, here's the RBAC module and the scheduling module and the ABAC module, and like, that seems too fine. David had proposed this level of granularity, and it generally seems like it could work. I hadn't actually read through the pull yet, but when David and I had talked in SIG auth, we were more focused on the principles about what goes here and what is this allowed to depend on, similar to what we set up in K8s.io utils. So the guidelines in utils have much clearer guidelines. I'll put it in the notes example, guidelines for utils. I expected to see something similar here to say, like, what is the purpose of this? What goes here? What's the structure? What is it allowed to depend on?
Right.
So that it doesn't become a bucket of
utils. Right. But then the name is also kind of library-go is probably not going to work well either. We already have client.go, client-go. And if somebody's looking at the GitHub repositories at that level, they won't know what library-go means either.
I'm not particularly attached to the name. I think if there are things in here that span components, it's going to be really hard to come up with a name that is both descriptive and accurate.
So are you saying that there is a consensus that we need at least one staging repository where we will have such things? From that call, at least.
If we don't have this, then I don't see how things like kube control and out of tree scheduler make progress.
Okay, so
or we end up having to put it somewhere where it really doesn't belong, and like someone who wants to
can't be tested either, right? That's the other problem.
Yeah. So I think there's a need here. I think a place to put helpers that build on top of API types and maybe client methods and don't really have any other dependencies is a reasonable thing to want. So yeah, the things that I would want to see improved here are the name. So I'm adding to our notes, outstanding questions. Name, library go, confused with client go, question mark. Structure, probably avoid SIG named packages and tend toward component oriented packages. So like scheduling, authentication, something like that. People who are using these shouldn't need to care about what SIGs they come from. And if one of these components changes owning SIGs, like let's name it after the component. So it continues making sense. And then requirements, guidelines for code living here. No K8s.io depths outside API machinery, API client go.
Just those three, Jordan, or is it more, or are you saying any staging repositories?
That's an example.
Okay.
I think those three, no staging depths.
Okay.
That's probably where I would start. I think the goal of this is to have a place for API helpers that don't drag in a ton of other things. Like you don't have to import API server or things like that.
Right. Then we can just name it API helpers, right? At that point, if we say that this is API helpers, so we'll just use the API helpers. Yeah.
Naming is hard.
Yeah. library, yeah, library will denote more general purpose.
Yeah. If the goal is to have pretty scoped functions that take API types and client methods and operate on them, then something like API helpers might be clear.
Okay.
And then around the requirements and guidelines accompanied by import guards to make sure you don't accidentally pick up.
Right.
Yeah. So that was the context. I'm in favor of it to unblock things like kube control moving out and external schedulers and things.
Okay.
But the structure and the name and the requirements and the guidelines, I think, need to be in place before we start spinning it up.
So definitely, we don't want dependency in Kubernetes, k8s/Kubernetes, right?
Well, it's a staging repo, so it can't depend back.
So that's by definition. Okay.
Yeah, by definition. But even among other staging repos, like the goal of this is to basically just sit on top of the API and client goes to.
Can it vendor in things that we don't vendor usually, or do we care?
I would push back on that. I would start by keeping this as small of a dependency tree as we can.
Okay, should not add to dependency debt. Is the way we should probably phrase it.
And only on API machinery, API client go, and transitive debts.
Okay.
Yeah, I would start with something like that, and then there'd need to be really strong evidence that anything beyond that was required.
Okay, and so just in terms of mechanics, this would be a single repo that will be across SIGs, right? So, but then scheduler might be the first one to get in. So there is a bunch of mechanisms that we need to do to get a staging repository in place, right? So including requesting, a GitHub repository for the stage repo, then updating the publishing bot, and there's like a bunch of things to do. So
I think we need this name and proposed structure and requirements to be agreed on before we make that request. Like, it's a little silly to request something and be like, what do you want? Like, we don't know. We'll figure it out later.
Yeah. So the question there is, like, who needs to sign off on this other than scheduler, because scheduler is the first one asking for this.
So like I said, we talked about it in SIG Auth. We would use this to make the RBAC helpers available.
So auth, CLI, and scheduler. Those are
the three that I know of that would be interested in using this right away.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one way to do this is we could drop a note to Kubernetes dev and CC those 3 SIGs and say, okay, this is what we are thinking about. Is there things in your area that you can think of? That'll satisfy these conditions.
If we have multiple use cases already, which we do, then I think it would probably be easier to think through the structure and get approval just based on those use cases. Like, we have 2 or 3 examples.
Okay.
And I think that's probably enough to get started and to take to SIG Arch to say, like, here's what we'd like to do and why, and here are the SIGs that are interested so far. And kind of like, it's easier to start and try out 2 or 3 things, and then if we see issues, like, make adjustments instead of getting like 30 things and then having to go fix 30 things if we decide we want to tweak something.
Right. So the only other thing here is, like, we have to be like really diligent about what we could let into this repository. Other staging repositories, we are not as careful. So this.
Right. So that's why I was talking about like import guards around
Right.
like what this is allowed to depend on and things like that.
Okay.
So we have some of those tools in place. If we set that up as part of the creation of it, that seems like it would.
Okay. It makes me feel better, Jordan. Thank you.
Yeah, I was kind of on the fence, but if I don't have an answer for someone like Cube Control who's wanting to move out, like who's trying to do the thing that we've asked them to do, and they're like,
Right.
where do we put this code? We're happy to put it wherever you want us to put it. Just give us a place to put it. And I'm like, I have no place for you, but please get out of tree. Like that's not reasonable.
Understood. Hey, Walter, welcome.
Hey, Dems. Hey, Jordan.
Hey.
Okay, so now that we have nailed this one, we have enough feedback for Jan to take a look at it and make progress. So this will unblock him. So do you want to step through issues and PRs, Jordan, or do you have other things that you want to do?
I didn't have a lot. This PR was the main one that had come up recently for me.
Yeah, I can do the PRs and issues by myself. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'll do it later. Walter, did you have something you wanted to talk about today?
Not especially. I mean, I wanted. You're both aware, but I have the graph to help the visualization of the graph to help understand the layout and what needs sort of what our layering model currently looks like, so that we don't introduce cycles and things like that. Help us sort of come up with what the layering should be, what it is, and maybe what it should be. The other thing is we're slowly but steadily moving the cloud provider stuff out of tree. And so I don't know if you've noticed, but CC's been doing pretty good work, and I'm hoping that CCM and all of its dependencies will be in staging by the time 119 lands.
Yeah, I'd seen.
Did you see anything odd here? Is the way I would ask this question, Walter. You have stared at it for a while you're generating. Did you see anything concerning?
I can't even.
I'm not sure. I mean, I certainly, there were a few things that are surprising. None of them are coming to mind right now, but there were things that were at different depths in this tree than I was expecting. I'm not sure that's wrong, but I definitely found one or two of the items a little surprising.
Okay, I'm trying to open it in a better editor so I could zoom in.
Yeah, I would love to work out a nicer way of building this. I mean, certainly there were a few of the items in the, rather than in the staging only, but in the one that includes some of the externals, where I was a little surprised that there were a couple of dependencies like utils, which we depend on a bunch of it from staging, but it also depends on a bunch of things from staging.
No, that's not true.
Let me double check.
Right.
Maybe I'm not thinking.
It shouldn't be true. It shouldn't be possible.
Yeah. Well, that's why I said it surprised me a little bit. I'm fairly sure there were one or two. It would be nice if I had an intermediary way of looking at this. So connectivity client, that's Klog. That one I'm not. Oh, maybe it's not as bad as I thought. So utils, I guess, only depends on Klog v2. So that's not so bad.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And connectivity client only on Klog v2. Okay.
So I swear I've written CI checks like 3 different ways to try to keep that from happening.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, just things like the cloud provider, I'd be very happy when it's gone. It depends on more stuff than I'd like. Yeah.
What is this K-Tsayo KubeCut? Oh, sorry, never mind. It's kubectl and kubelet. I always misread one for the other.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, something to be aware of. I'm almost tempted to try getting some color bars on there because, I mean, clearly we have some very distinct layers in here. But
Yeah.
Yeah, nice work on this, Walter. It's definitely way better than what we've been managed to generate before.
well, and I think over time I can make it better, but I figured it was better to just land something
Yeah.
because this is never going to be anything other than a I'm bored and I want something to hack on script. But
So do we want to like check in the SVG for this, or do we want to just check in the script? The reason for
Probably
asking,
just checking the script. The SVG will be, or the image will be stale immediately, probably.
yeah,
yeah,
the
unless we're going to put it into some sort of build step that'll regenerate it,
correct.
I think it, yeah.
Yeah, do we want to force this to remain static is the question there. So if we do the SVG, then we are like forcing, if somebody changes some dependency, then they are actually forced to update the SVG file.
I think the publishing bot rules actually express this already.
Yes.
Like all of these relationships are in the publishing bot because we have to go in order, like topological order.
Except for the external ones, like the structured diff and klog v2 and things like that. That is here, gender. So those are not there. The publishing bot has only the list of things in the staging repository.
Yeah.
This is a little bit more than that, but it's fine. Hey, Mo.
How's it going? I couldn't tell from the agenda if you guys were actually meeting because it doesn't. You haven't updated it to today. I was like, well, I'll just see what you guys.
Oh yeah, sorry. Thank you.
Whoops.
Yeah, you're right.
There we go.
Thank you. Yeah, I cut and pasted, and then I started adding the agenda. I forgot about the date.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't sure. I was like, I wonder if this is last time or this.
Yeah, at first it was just Jordan and me, and then Walter popped in. So Walter, CCM, steady progress to staging. So Walter, another question I had for you for the staging one is, the CSI migration stuff, is that in place for your CCM as well?
So it is. So I'm quibbling here, but so CSI is not directly part of the CCM work. It is part of the cloud provider extraction work.
Yeah.
So I'm staying in touch with Saad and Michelle on the CSI stuff. I know that on the cloud provider GCP repo, we are hoping that in the next quarter we will actually prove the CSI stuff works. So I'm coordinating with Michelle and Saad about showing that the CSI can actually be used to get a cloud provider free volume handling. And then after that, I think on the cloud provider extraction, the longest poll we have is the credential providers. So the KEP has landed, but right now, Nick Turner, Andrew Sykim, and I'm trying to remember, but someone from the Azure team have each tried to actually begin the implementation of the credential provider so that we can have a cloud provider free kubelet. However, everyone is really busy, and so I'm not sure whether or not we're going to have a prototype version of that for 119. which is what I'd really been hoping for.
So would we be able to squeeze it in, or are we past code freeze at this point? We are past feature freeze.
So this is why I called it a prototype rather than an alpha.
Right, right, okay.
So even if we can't get it into 119, if we can at least show a functional implementation of the cap, I'd be pretty happy, but I'm not even sure we're going to get that. And then that makes me worry whether or not we can have something ready for 120.
Okay.
Especially
I will chase this a little bit, Walter.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, and come bug me. I mean, it's something my SIG. I have both a working group and a SIG I'm part of, and this is our long pole on both.
Okay.
So I do not object to you chasing, but I'll let you know. Like I am closely tracking where we are with this because it is our longest pole.
Right. Sorry.
I was going to say, also, once that's done, each of the entry providers presumably is going to need to do their own implementation of the sidecar for the credential provider sidecar.
Okay. And the sidecar is to inject a binary for the credential provider itself.
Yeah, I believe so.
Mo, did you have anything to talk about today?
No, I think I missed the conversation about Library Go, which would have been the one. I was busy earlier, so I couldn't join. But
oh, no worries. Yeah, we kind of went through the thought experiment, more like Jordan went through, and I was watching. So.
Yeah, I mean, OpenShift has one. It worked fine as long as you're careful for what you let people put in there. And I see you have that, aka import guards. So I think we're fine. So I'll review the PR and stuff.
Okay.
The only thing I saw in there so far is there's a security context file with a list of people, and to me, it just feels like it should just be the product security committee or project, whatever. Can't remember the name now. But like, it's literally that list of people minus the people that are no longer on there now because they've left. So yeah, I don't know why it needs to be like written out specifically.
Part of the reason it needs to be written out is because it gets published out to other repos, and then people look at that code, and so like a link to an alias doesn't mean anything if it's in another repo. So it's
sorry, I meant like it should be generated from.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah. We shouldn't hand maintain it because it's just going to change anyway.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
Do you want to walk through the issues, Dims, or do you want to do that asynchronously?
So let me just bring up the page at least if you, oops, what did I do? If you all see something that you are interested in, we'll talk about that at least. Let's do the PRs first. I swear it's slower when I share the screen. Okay, so we talked about the staging repository. We talked about the dependency path. This has been stuck for a while. We're not going to make progress there. These are goal-int issues. Maybe we can, one of them well, two of them needs rebase, so there's probably only one. Never mind, it's stale anyway. So document removing feature gates. What did we want to do here? Add instructions on how to remove feature gates. And oh, that's it. Maybe we should get it in. Okay, never mind. I'll ping you on that later, Jordan. Copy.
The Go System D V22, I think that came in as part of Run C Container D.
Yeah, I think the problem there was we were getting two different versions of GoSystemd from two different places, and then we were trying to reconcile to one copy of it instead of having two of them in our tree. I'll go back and look at that. Okay, so this is what am I looking at now? Issues, yeah, okay. Staging repository, module graph, Golang failures, credential provider we covered, Golang issues we covered, feature gates we covered, move something to staging. Ooh, can we make progress here in test framework? It's marked as 120 though.
It's unclear that what we currently have in test edu framework should be published for external use.
Yeah, it's just been copied out by other people already. So it's by default out. So we haven't made any progress on the VMware library dependency for sure. Credential providers, KubeADM. KubeADM is stuck. I think this is stuck on the SIG release side at this point.
Yep.
Yeah, so we've been, I poked at this a little bit, Golang CI lint, but then our verify scripts are, not amenable to doing this because this one assumes that it runs multiple linters at the same time. We don't want to run each linter separately because it's just going to expand the time taken to run. So each of our verify shell scripts do something slightly different. It's not exactly the same list of files that they all operate on. So that was the other problem that I noticed. And we could change. Golang CI is really nice. I've seen it used in several other projects, but it's just going to be a big effort to get there. And I don't know how much useful it is to do that work.
Yeah, I would probably, that seems less code organization and more like testing. If testing feels like this is valuable, then I wouldn't object to it. If they don't, then I'm fine closing it as well. So.
Okay. I will add a note there. Remove cluster directory, that's stuck on many different levels. One of them is...
That seems much more of a cluster lifecycle SIG testing. Like,
yeah.
The 3 SIGs that are on there now are the ones who, like that, I think that's the right intersection. It's not really code organization. So I would probably take it off of our list.
Okay. Yeah, the thing there also is nobody's working on it.
I mean, I think there are people working on parts of it, so I'm actively trying to get at least the cube up, which I think GCP is the only user of, out of KK.
So I did see you copy the CubeUp scripts to the cloud provider GCP repository, and I eyeballed the differences, and seems like it's going down the divergent paths for sure at this point.
Well, again, I mean, I don't even want it in cloud provider GCP. It's just it's a stopgap until we can come up with a better deployment strategy for cloud provider GCP.
Okay.
But I believe a huge portion, I mean, there are definitely SIG testing and SIG scalability users of /cluster, but I believe a huge portion of /cluster is just GCP's usage of CubeUp.
Right. But the other way also to look at this, Walter, is maybe that is the right place to keep it and use it from there. And we would basically, for when we are testing KK, we would say we need an additional repository injected, and we would basically kick off the cluster CubeUp scripts from that repository instead of the one in the main repository, and we would basically nuke the one that we have in KK, once we get that working.
I would actually question that. I mean, I would suggest that eventually it's not Kubernetes' responsibility to do the GCP testing. That's cloud provider GCP's responsibility. And so some of that should just go away from anything KK has to worry about. It does leave us with SIG scalability needing an answer to where they do their scalability testing, but.
Right, but we still have one more problem, which is how do we do multi-node testing for KK if it's not CubeUp?
Agreed, but I mean, I would also rephrase that as how do we do multi-node testing when we are once we've removed all the entry cloud providers?
So the way one way to look at that is when we are using CubeUp, does it really use the GCP entry provider all the time?
I believe so.
Even for conform, well, I don't know. It's maybe not needed for conformance, but it probably switches things on. So we'll definitely have a hole here, which is what do we use for KK, right?
Yeah, and I think it's a larger hole of larger than just cluster, right? I think we have a general, how do we do certain types of testing once cloud provider has been completely extracted?
Right. I guess we pointed to SIG testing then.
I mean, or SIG cloud provider. I mean, I have an entire doc about how to do E2E testing post cloud provider extraction, but I think it becomes a real problem.
Right. Okay. The circular dependency within kubelet, it's definitely SIG node. I don't know why we ended up adding here, so I'll need to clean that up. And those two about kubelet are related to each other, so we should probably get that off our board. Semantic, yeah. Not going to touch the semantic imports at this point. Do we even leave the guidelines for the commands should go open anymore? Probably. No, clean them up, close it out.
I thought it was pretty established.
Right. Okay, so I'll close out some things and I'll kick out others from our label and basically clean it up after the call. Yeah, this one we don't even have to worry about it. We'll just give it to SIG release, let them do it. They already tagged release engineering. I haven't looked at this one, Heapster. I'll have to go look at that. Okay, that's about it for today. Sounds good? Bye, everyone.
I guess.